Okay, ready to begin when you are, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Welcome everyone to our first remote community liaison meeting. May I remind everyone present here at the meeting, it will be recorded via the internet and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put up their hand if they can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand and/or chat function if they're an attendee? If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with the broadband or Wi-Fi so they could be heard. Thank you. And can I pass you to Amy now, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. You've asked me to provide the apologies for you this evening. I'd just like to confirm that we have received apologies from Mrs Hodges for Barry Town Council, although I do believe that Councillor Perks, a member on the committee, is acting on behalf of the Barry Town Council as well this evening. We've also had apologies from Mr Christian Tatt from Sully and Lavernock. And we've also had apologies from Mr Ray Thomas for Llandau Community Council. I'd also like to pass on some apologies for Mr Reid, who will be joining us, but he will need to leave at 7 o'clock this evening. For the sake of our Town and Community Council representatives that are on the line and able to hear me, they have the raise hand function as we go through this evening. So as we come to agenda items, they are able to raise their hand to signal to the democratic officers that they wish to speak verbally to the committee. However, they can also provide just a written question to the committee through the question function that they have on their control panel. Instructions for both of these have been provided to the representatives in advance. I'd also just like to inform all of the committee that back in January on the 28th, we were hoping to have brought the Town and Community Council Charter Action Plan to the committee, but obviously with this being our first committee back with the COVID situation, we haven't been able to make that happen, but we will be hopefully bringing that to you to the next committee meeting, which is scheduled for January. Thank you, Chairman. That's all of the apologies I've received so far.
Thank you, Amy. Going on to agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January. Can I ask that the committee approve the minutes, subject to the acknowledgement of Councillor Andrew being present in the last meeting? Could I have a seconder, please?
I second.
Second. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, I don't think Chief Inspector Tony Williams is in yet. Is that correct, Amy?
Sorry, Chair, do you mind if we just confirm there are no declarations of interest this evening, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Are there any declarations of interest this evening?
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. And shall we move on to agenda item 5?
Chair, Mr Tony Williams does appear to be online.
Right. Okay. Can you?
Hello, Tony. I'm afraid that signal was rather cut up. Would you mind trying again? I'm afraid not, Tony. I'm afraid not. It's jumping around, I'm afraid.
Okay, I'll try and dial in the old-fashioned way as my computer's playing, so I'll try and connect via telephone shortly.
Okay, Tony, yes, if you try and connect on the telephone for us, please, and we'll continue with Christian's presentation first.
Good evening, Christian. Can I ask you, Mr. Chris Hadfield is the operational manager for South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. And if you could continue with your report, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yes. Evening, Chair. Hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll stay on microphone only because I know that putting a video on does cause confusion on my laptop. So,
Okay,
so this is really an opportunity to give you an update from South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, our response to the coronavirus pandemic and where we currently are. So I'll start at the beginning. So during the pandemic, we experienced quite low levels of staff absence. We developed a real clear and efficient, effective operational response that's been maintained throughout, and our staff have been particularly good for us, and our staff also volunteered to assist and support our colleagues in the Welsh Ambulance Service Trust. Within that, then, we also maintain a good command and control structure internally and the levels of PPE throughout. Our key part for us over the pandemic is maintaining service delivery. In other words, fire engines going out and serving the communities, which is something we've managed to adhere to. So our operational competency training has continued right the way through this, so has our initial trainee courses. One thing that did hamper us a little bit was the effectiveness to carry out our prevention and protection work and education activities. So the prevention work being our community safety activities, where we go into people's homes for home fire safety checks, and our protection activities, which was the business fire safety element of it, and education obviously going into schools. So certainly during the pandemic, those reduced significantly, but we have now modified our ways of working, have changed our ways of working to allow us to have more delivery at doorstep, to get over the thresholds, but also to carry out online home fire safety checks. So that's something now we're going to continue going into the future. And it's probably been a bit more effective for us. Internally, we've also, like everybody else, improved the way we communicate, both internally and externally. And we've just introduced all our stations now with new video conferencing facilities that allow us now to connect up as a service. Like I said, both internally and externally with key partners. I guess our focus right now is making sure we restart all our preventative activities. And at the moment, that's something which we're working on. And that includes our youth programs. One of such is the Fire Cadets branch at Barry Emergency Services Station. So it's we've been trying to keep a COVID secure environment at all our stations, certainly in Vale, Glamorgan and Bridgend. So having our Fire Cadets back in Barry has been fantastic. Last time I was here, I did report we were opening the first quad emergency services station at Lantworth Major. I'm proud to announce that did go ahead just in the nick of time before the lockdown all kicked in. And like I said there, this is a really good opportunity for our emergency services to work together and share a facility. So we've been in now a couple of months together, and it is really working particularly well, even though COVID has come across our bows. So that's really just a snapshot of where we've been as a service during the coronavirus pandemic. We're still not obviously out the woods as anybody, any other service or emergency services. So we've still got our command cells set up in our headquarters just to ensure that should any second wave come through, then we're prepared in order to keep our service delivery, frontline appliances, and like I said, making sure our service to the communities. So what I've looked at is just some comparative data really of this time last year, our first quarter and second quarter 19 in comparison to 20. And it's quite a reassuring picture that we haven't seen a huge spike in home dwelling fires or accidental dwelling fires. In fact, for the Vale of Glamorgan, we've seen a fall of 23%, which is really encouraging. We did see a small rise of 54% in the Vale of Glamorgan for refuse fires, but we attribute that to the fact that people couldn't get to a local amenity site for a period of time, and we were experiencing refuge fires out in the open. But I'm pleased to say now that has now reduced. One of the most reassuring ones for the Vale of Glamorgan at the moment is our reduction in road traffic collisions, and that's a dramatic drop from last year of 70%. Yes, we had less cars on the road during lockdown, but a 70% fall is quite dramatic. And in particular, that would be in the Cowbridge area. So something's going particularly well for our road traffic collision work, both with the police ourselves and WAST. So hopefully that gives you a snapshot of where we are. And I'm willing to take any questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. Can I suggest that we take questions first from town and community reps via Matthew, who is monitoring the web chat. So Matthew, do you have any questions from councillors, please? And we can pause for a moment while we have a catch up.
Hello, Chair. Just to confirm, I haven't had any questions through.
Okay, we can come back to that, but are there any questions from Vale councillors, please? No? Oh, Councillor Penrose?
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question. I just think we should include in minutes a vote of thanks to the emergency services for their activities during the COVID lockdown periods.
Yeah, that's a good statement. Thank you. I think we'd all support that and pass on our thanks. Thank you, Councillor Penrose.
I'll make sure that's included in the minutes.
I'll pass that on to Chief Fire Officer Jake Way.
Are there any questions coming via web chat, or is all quiet? Okay. Thank you very much. Can I thank you very much for joining us tonight, Chris? And we look forward to hearing from you again in the near future.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to leave this remote meeting.
Thank you.
If we go back to agenda item 4, is Chief Inspector Tony Williams with us now?
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me now? I've used old-fashioned technology now instead.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice to hear you're with us. If you'd like to present your report then, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Just to let you know, I'm Firearms Commander for South Wales Police tonight, so if an incident comes in, I may have to go, so hopefully it won't. So I do apologise in advance if that happens. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you all, albeit unusually remotely. It seems like an age ago now since I last updated you with policing activity. And much in the same vein as Chris's update, it's really around what's been going on since the lockdown, and obviously how we've managed that locally and what it looks like for us moving forward, as well as just normal policing matters, which, to be honest, we haven't stopped. So it has been a difficult time to get the balance of the two. And whilst it's been unprecedented for us all, really, as a society, it certainly has been for policing. And in my 23 years, obviously, I've never experienced anything like it, really. But obviously, policing the regulations locally has been a challenge. The police have really sort of endeavoured to engage, explain and encourage at the start of the pandemic, and indeed throughout the pandemic, in terms of our conversations with the public. And occasionally it has been necessary to use enforcement as a mechanism. You know, things like paragliders coming from, you know, Gloucestershire and Herefordshire and so forth to Nash Point, and those who were blatantly disregarding the rules and regulations that were applicable at that time. You know, we've had a number of vehicles removed. So we were punitive when we felt it was appropriate. But largely our approach is more about engagement and trying to encourage those to understand the regulations. And I think that's what we tried to certainly employ down in Barry Island, where we saw an influx of unprecedented numbers of visitors to South Wales during that period. And of course, in addition to the demands placed on officers in relation to COVID, we still had the normal policing business to look after and to police. So, you know, missing persons, violence, drugs, robbery, etc., still ongoing at unprecedented rates, in addition to the COVID legislation. So the early sort of stages of the pandemic were challenging, to say the least. Just to give an example, really, of the type of demand that we were under in the Vale of Glamorgan, for the first 3 months of the pandemic, I think we had around 7,500 incidents to attend, and about 1,700 of those were in relation to COVID breaches or that type of activity around the legislation. So it's about 25%, or just thereabouts, of our demand were related to COVID breaches and COVID incidents. The only redeeming thing for us from a demand perspective was obviously the nighttime economy was shut down. So, you know, that balance then, you know, that made up for that, if you like. So we didn't have to police the nighttime economy through the COVID restrictions on lockdown, but we certainly were inundated with demand in relation to COVID legislation. So in relation to that, we also had, as you will all be aware, unseasonably warm weather, children being home from school, furloughed employees, an inability to travel abroad. So I know all of you will be aware of the increased footfall, if you like, at areas like Penarth, Esplanade, Ogmore by Sea, Barry Island, Cosmoston Lakes and so forth. You know, it was a massive undertaking, the number of visitors we had and trying to keep them safe, and obviously police other challenges at that time were particularly challenging for all the staff. And then as the R number started to drop, crime started to go back up again. So, you know, as we started to unlock the lockdown, if you like, back to normality, we were indeed faced with the normal patterns of criminality, and they started to rise again through to normal levels. And over the last month or so, we've had a period where we were almost back to normal in terms of the way we police. However, with the recent surge, if you like, in the virus once again in our community, we are back to that position whereby we are starting to have to police COVID-related incidents. Although I would say that the initial synopsis from us is the demand is far less. So over the weekend, for example, about 6% of our demand was related to sort of COVID breaches or house parties, whereas at the peak of the pandemic, that could have been up to about 30%. So we'll keep a close eye on that, really, in terms of where we go moving forward in terms of breaches of COVID regulations and the differences between each areas. And as local authorities go into lockdowns, the challenge really of having consistency of approach. So that's really where we've been over the last 6 months or so. And then just some headlines really into sort of significant incidents across the Vale of Glamorgan. As I'm sure you'll all be aware, on the 25th of June, there was a significant disorder in Ogmore by Sea, which was a bit of a watershed moment really in terms of the policing of the pandemic. I think at that time, the lockdown had started to ease. And as you all know from the images on social media, quite unsavoury scenes there on the beach. So just to give you an update on that particular incident, that investigation is ongoing. We set the team up immediately the following day. There are 6 people who have been arrested for that. We are in consultation with the CPS in relation to charges. But in relation to Ogmore generally as a community, I think it was an opportune moment really for us as a police service, along with our colleagues in Vale of Glamorgan Council, just to look at some of the issues there, longer term issues. And myself and Emma, I think is present tonight, have been in regular dialogue and meetings around some of the longer term issues such as parking, litter, ASB, speeding and drug use. And there are a significant number of plans for next year in order to be more effective really as a partnership in how we manage the issues at Ogmore by Sea. And from a policing perspective, we are very, very keen not to see a repeat of that incident on the 25th of June ever again. So I think the approach that we've undertaken and the engagement we've had with residents and the feedback we've had with them has been really positive. So, you know, that is a good news story, hopefully, in terms of the way that particular village is managed and the demands are managed. And then Barry Island then, we had an operation running over the summer where we saw up to 20,000 people visiting a day, significant footfall. Again, you know, turning a lot of people away, families away from over the bridge, was trying to manage the consumption of alcohol at that location, particularly amongst young people. We got some funding. So again, working with Emma and the team and the local authority, we're quite pleased actually with the way it went over the summer. We received a significant amount of alcohol. Fortunately for us, there were limited arrests, but it was a summer-long operation, which was quite taxing. But I think, you know, we had the opportunity to ensure that we would allow the traders and the economic resurge, if you like, following COVID to take place. And, you know, we think we played a big part in that along with our colleagues in the local authority. So we're quite pleased in the way that went. And there are some lessons learned from the way it's gone in the summer, but I don't think we anticipated the volume of people who would attend on Barry Island on a daily basis. And that was an eye-opener for us, and certainly something that we've learned from this summer. And then just general update into policing into the rural Vale. I know Christian mentioned the emergency services station in Llantwit. It has been successful in terms of embedding that approach. We've lost the PCSO, Sean Richards, retired this week, so she will be replaced. But the team itself is up to full strength. There's a sergeant of 5 now working from there. There's a number of PCSOs work from there. And an additional development is us hoping to, we will be working alongside the fire service in Cowbridge Fire Station to have officers permanently based there as well. So that response to the Western Vale will be far greater than travelling from Barry. And we'll have permanent visibility, if you like, in the areas such as Cowbridge and Llantwit, and also free up our neighbourhood team in Llantwit to really tackle some of the long-term issues in the Vale of Glamorgan. So as a force, we've been restructuring, as you may know. Cardiff and the Vale is now our basic command unit. So we're aligned to Cardiff, and the early stages of that amalgamation have been positive in terms of the resourcing and what that looks like moving forward for us. So business as usual is carrying on. We've done a number of drugs warrants around the area. On the 11th of September, a Bradley drug dealer was sentenced to 17.5 years. He's ordered to pay back £500,000, and he was responsible for the distribution of up to 18 kilograms of Class A drugs across South Wales. And these warrants are ongoing on a daily and weekly basis. So we're still trying to tackle some of the more serious harm issues for our communities despite the pandemic, and that's going to continue into the winter. And then finally, we have seen a recent spike in rogue trader incidents in Sully and in Llanfydd Major and in Barry. It's the standard modus operandi of offering to do work which is substandard for buildings that don't necessarily need work, and then obviously relieving quite vulnerable individuals of a significant amount of money in the community. And it's something we're alive to, and we have an operation ongoing to target those offenders at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months for us, I think, policing wise, with the pandemic and the regulations in place, whilst normal business continues. But resourcing wise, we're looking far better than we were at the start of the pandemic, ironically. So hopefully things are looking up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Chief Inspector. Have we got any questions? Town and community councillors first, please, via Matthew on web chat. Have a little pause while we can catch up.
There's no questions currently, Chair.
Okay. Can I move to Councillor Penrose, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's only a everyday housekeeping issue for Tony, and that is, I understand from residents, the community policing website is a little behind on recent moves of PCSOs in the Vale. Perhaps he could have a word with them and bring it up to date. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Councillor, I'll have a look at that. It's sort of centrally run, that is, so I'll make sure that's updated to reflect the current PCSO for the respective wards. That's something I can look at straight away.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carroll, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tony, for that presentation, and thank you to everyone within the force for the work that you've done over the past 6 months or so. It's been unprecedented times, and it's put a lot of pressures, extra pressures on your service. So just wanted to place that on the record. Just one question with regard to the situation with Ogmore. Admittedly, the weather is different now, or is going to be worse, so that's one thing that's likely to prevent such an incident happening. But I was just going to ask whether there was any evidence or any work, that any information you had as to whether that incident obviously took place when licensed premises were unable to open, and while premises can open now, there are obviously restrictions as to who can use them, no mixing households, for example. So my question really is in two parts. Firstly, is there any evidence that such incidents are more likely, given that licensed premises aren't available for people to drink alcohol and meet and mingle? And secondly, if there is such evidence, what action is being taken to help combat that while these restrictions remain in place? I'll
answer the obviously chronologically. The first one, that I think you're right. I think the licensed premises situation definitely had an impact on that gathering, which was a perfect storm really around the summer, the unprecedented hot weather, the lack of ability to get out and about with your friends, the collective gathering via social media that we weren't aware of. And then I don't know if you remember, we saw similar scenes down in the basin in Cardiff Bay a month or so after, which was again against the backdrop of inaccessible licensed premises. So whilst I think there definitely is a correlation with that type of behaviour and the lack of ability to go to licensed premises and the hot weather, I think that's unquestioned. I think moving forward into the winter, we are alive to the potential for a repeat, or as you allude to, I think the weather plays a significant part in that. And to, albeit until 10 p.m, the licensed premises are now still open. So we haven't seen, and we haven't had any sight across the whole force area of a repeat, really. I know we had the rave situation going back a few months ago, but as you allude to, I think the weather will play a significant part in the ability or even the desire of young people to gather in such large groups. And that is probably the only saving grace from being freezing cold and wet in the winter for us. But I mean, it's certainly something we're alive to on a daily basis. And what it has done for us, really, I think obviously every day is a learning opportunity, but it's certainly made us far more alive to the potential for gathering. And I think the focus on licensed premises generally to manage through the COVID period in terms of the restrictions and the way that's been managed is far tighter. I think that was evident from the video of the pub in Cardiff, Moulin Rouge pub, I think it was, where they had a big gathering outside, a crowd, and that was almost closed down the following night. So I think we're far more robust in terms of our management around COVID and far more alive to the potential for gatherings of that nature. And I do believe it was a one-off, specifically at that location. However, it's something that's on the radar, certainly as we move forward into this new uncertain period now.
Cheers, Tony.
Have we got any more questions, please? Councillor Perks.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, with the number of sort of police officers sort of needed to be on Barry Island policing that over the summer, how did the police service actually cope with policing the rest of Barry? And what were besides COVID, what were the major sort of issues that the police sort of faced in the rest of Barry, sort of like the sort of different criminality that was going on? If you could give us an idea about that, please.
Yeah, certainly. I was fortunate enough to get a chunk of funding to allow me to provide officers, which we did need, actually, as you're probably aware, down on the island over the summer months, particularly from June to September. So the funding really took care of the officers in that location. I think what it did do as well then was allow me to focus on the issues and not ignore the other issues across wider Barry. So your antisocial behaviour, places like Maslin Park and that type of thing. Some boy races down on Forest of the Millennium. They were all still being dealt with while we managed to maintain visibility and a presence down on the island. One of the things that COVID restricted us from was our ability to engage and meet people in person, obviously, and hold meetings with yourselves or the local community. And one of the things I think COVID has done for all of us really is made us adapt to technology. So what we are going to be looking forward to doing in the next couple of months is just in relation to packed meetings and so forth, and engagement online as an option. So that's one thing we are looking at. But in terms of the wider Barry, the issues that we've dealt with are the standard issues that affect most communities, but certainly somewhere like ours, where you have quite a high level of shoplifting, theft and drug use, antisocial behaviour, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of violence generally was recorded in that period. And our officers from response teams were dealing with normal business throughout that entire period. But I think we were allowed to do that because I got some funding to tackle Barry Island, and I'll be obtaining that funding for next year as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Perks. Can I ask Councillor Cave, please? Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not so much a question, but just really to reiterate the remarks made by Councillor Carroll, that as a committee, I'd really like us to give our thanks for the fantastic role the police are playing in trying to keep us all safe in these particularly difficult and challenging times.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Have we any more questions, please? Councillor Perks, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask whether we could have the contact details for the inspector as well, please. I know we've had an email address for him previously, whether we could have that recirculated.
Okay, maybe if the Chief Inspector is happy, he can pass them to Amy, and Amy, maybe you can pass it to councillors.
Yes, Chairman, that's no problem. I'll liaise with Tony after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
thank you
absolutely
very-
fine. No problem at all with that. And then usually for the police, I mean, I've been here 2.5 years now, so I'm sort of part of the furniture. So you've got a little bit of stability as well, and not that consistent churn you often get in policing. So I'll pass it out, and you can be assured that you can use that for some time yet.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Any other questions, please?
Can I check with Matthew, please, if there's any further comments or hands raised for town and community councils?
No, there's no questions or hands raised currently.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I thank you very much, Chief Inspector, for your remote visit this evening. We heard you loud and clear. I hope all town and community councillors did as well. And you're free to switch off if you wish to do so, but thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity to give you an update and to take part in the meeting. And I'll circulate the email to address to Amy, so you can contact me about any local issues. That's not a problem at all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 6. Can I ask Mr. Tom Bowring, Head of Policy and Business Transformation, to present his report, please? Are you there, Tom?
I am, thank you, Chair. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to bring this report to the committee this evening. Attached to the report to your committee, Chair, is a cabinet report that went to the Council's Cabinet on the 13th of July. And that was presenting the annual report for the Public Services Board, which, as members will know, is a statutory board that has been established by the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And it brings together statutory partners of the Health Service, Fire and Rescue, Natural Resources Wales and the local authority, as well as invited participants. So we include the police within that, further education, and also a representative of town and community councils. Councillor Cuddy from Penarth is the representative. We've got a duty to produce an annual report, and that's what was presented to Cabinet for their endorsement. We latterly then took that to Corporate Performance Committee for discussion around how we further scrutinise the work of the Public Services Board. And I wanted to bring it here to you because this is a report that demonstrates the work that all of those statutory and third sector organisations are doing to progress wellbeing in the Vale of Glamorgan. So I think it's an important report that members have sight of, and also that it contains useful information for both the committee but also representatives of town and community councils to use in their work. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I was just going to briefly describe the report rather than going through it in great detail, because it is a detailed report, and then obviously be happy to take any questions after that.
Yes, that's fine, Tom.
Great, thank you, Councillor. So the Public Services Board has got 4 priorities, or 4 wellbeing objectives, sorry, which are to enable people to get involved, so talking about engagement. It looks to reduce poverty and tackling issues linked to deprivation. Committed to giving children the best start in life, especially tackling issues of adverse childhood experience, and it's got an environmental theme around protecting, enhancing and valuing our environment as well. And as you can see, they're pretty broad-ranging issues that collectively we look to bring the public sector and third sector together to try and deliver action to progress. And in order to do that, we set 4 priorities for last year. The first was about delivering the Move More, Eat Well plan, which Public Health Wales lead on, and that's about diet, it's about the availability and affordability of food and the importance of exercise. The second was about tackling climate change, which this council, alongside Natural Resources Wales, are leading on. I was keen to get commitment from the PSB partners to do something that was a bit of a pathfinder. And I know this is one of the things that we talked about at the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee last summer around time banking and volunteering. So there's some work going on there. And also because we've got a huge range of skills and experience, but also opportunity to learn from one another. We've got an organisational learning project, and at the moment this is around improving engagement. And Christian Hadfield, who you heard from earlier from South Wales Fire and Rescue, is leading on that one. So the report itself provides you with an overview of what activity and challenges have been presented in each of those 4 priority areas. It also presents the statistical data that underpins the work of the PSB. We need to produce every 5 years an updated wellbeing assessment, which tackles lots of issues and looks to bring together lots of different demographic information. And that's one of the things that I thought that certainly Town and Community Council representatives might find useful as an evidence base for any decisions that perhaps they're taking in their councils. And it also then reflects a conversation that the PSB had in the summer around reflecting on the experience of coronavirus. So we've heard from the police and fire this evening about the particular issues that they've faced. We had a session where we shared quite candidly the experience that the organisations have had and looked at how that can be taken forward over the next year. So the final section of the annual report then talks about how we're going to progress those priorities in the coming year in light of coronavirus, but also with a commitment to increase the engagement with town and community councils, look at how we scrutinise the work of the PSB, progress towards achieving age-friendly status for the Vale of Glamorgan, and also look at how we can involve young people more. That is particularly following a session that we ran with young people on climate change, and I've got to say that was a really fascinating evening to listen to them. The report is supplemented by some case studies, so demonstrating the work that has been underway to try and bring it to life a little bit, because the PSB can feel a bit of an ethereal being, but actually it's delivering some important work. So that's highlighting some of the important things that have been done, and a personal shout out, I suppose, to my colleagues who supported the Vale Heroes campaign throughout the pandemic. Fantastic joint working with town and community councils and the third sector and this local authority to support people in our communities. So there's some details of that there. And as I said, the report now has been approved by Cabinet. It's been disseminated to a range of stakeholders, and I'll be looking to bring an update back to Cabinet and then Corporate Performance Committee over the winter, and obviously those papers are available then should any member or representatives from Town and Community Council want to have any further information.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I think you finished, or have I just lost? Have you switched your?
No, sorry, I just went quiet then, Councillor, rather than saying, and that's it from me.
Thank you, Tom. Have I got any questions, please? Matthew, have you got any questions from Town and Community Councillors?
There are no questions from Town and Community Councillors showing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to Vale Councillors. Have Vale Councillors got any questions for Tom, please? All is quiet. Okay, if I count to 5 and sorry.
Nothing on chat either, Chair.
Sorry, Matthew.
That was Mark, Sally. He was just saying that there weren't any written comments either.
Okay. All right. In that case, the recommendations are that committee considers the Vale of Glamorgan Public Service Board's annual report for 2019-20 and the progress partners are making in implementing the priorities set out in the wellbeing plan. There's no dissent, so we carry that recommendation. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7. Can I ask for Emma Reid, Operational Manager for Neighbourhood Services and Transport, to present this report? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, everybody's nodding. I need to, oh, that's great. I need to try and put my presentation up. So if you just bear with me a second.
Okay, Emma, just to confirm, we can see that now.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Okay, so you've got a report before you tonight, which has been referred from Cabinet, and I just want to just run through a presentation just to make the report a little bit easier to understand and to move through. So I'm going to speak to you briefly on the prevention of alcohol-related antisocial behaviour at our resorts, town centres and public open spaces. I'm going to give you an update on that, and I'm also going to make you aware of the current consultation that we've got ongoing. So here, what can a public space protection order do? In this case, we're looking at alcohol, and the purpose of that order is to provide a proportionate and robust response to alcohol-related antisocial behaviour. We had Chief Inspector Tony Williams on earlier, and he advised the committee of the issues that we'd had with alcohol and the need to seize alcohol in a number of locations and the resulting antisocial behaviour, particularly over the summer and the COVID period. The aim of the order is to effectively manage land to prevent any antisocial behaviour escalating, and that is done by providing relevant officers with additional powers to issue warnings, seize and confiscate alcohol and stop alcohol consumption. The powers also allow that if a person continues to drink that alcohol when required to stop by an authorised officer, and or does not surrender that alcohol in his or her possession when required to do so by an authorised officer, or refuses to hand over any containers of alcohol, whether they're sealed or unsealed. In fact, they don't even have to be containers. If we believe that they're alcohol, then they need to be handed over. We can confiscate, and we can also issue a fixed penalty notice. The aim of this order is to protect the land, to protect our open spaces, to protect our beaches, and it's also to protect the majority of people who are law-abiding citizens. There is a legal test which is required before any such order can be made, and that test is twofold. So the first part of that test requires that the behaviour being restricted must fulfil or must be likely to have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality, so those in the area that the order applies to. And also it's likely that the activities will be carried out in a public place within the area and that they will have such effect. The second condition is that activity is likely to be of a persistent or continuing nature, and it is likely to those activities are likely to be unreasonable, and then you can justify the restrictions imposed by the notice. So that's the legal test that we need to apply when looking at these orders. Just a bit of background. Believe it or not, we do actually already have some of these orders in place, alcohol public space protection orders, and they're in a variety of locations, and they've been around since 2017. We've got some in Penarth, Barry, Roost, Lantwick Major and Cowbridge. However, those are due to expire in October 2020. So following issues over the summer this year with the good weather and also COVID-related issues with people holidaying at home, we've also added to this consultation other areas where we've had issues and where we consider there are issues. And those locations include Cosmston Country Park, Porthcurry Country Park, Penarth Pier, and the Esplanade, Ogmore Beach area, which Tony Williams referred to earlier, Lantwick Major Beach, and also Roost Point. There, I've just attached there the link to the Cabinet papers, but you have got those in your papers tonight, so I won't go to it. So the consultation, it did actually start back in August, but it's been quite a popular consultation. So we have decided to extend it until the 2nd of November 2020. I see if I can do this now, bear with me. So this is the link. I don't know whether it's going to let me do it, but we'll try. It's not going to let me do it, so apologies about that. So there is a link here, which I can give details in the chat or I can send on. And that link takes you directly to the consultation. It includes all the current areas that are subject to the orders that we're looking to renew. And it also contains all of the new areas and all of the maps for those areas. We've also erected site notices at each of the sites where the orders will come in, and we'd obviously welcome any of your feedbacks either tonight or on the proposals via the website. So next steps, once we close the consultation and once we've looked at all the feedback that we've received, we'll obviously consider that feedback and we'll determine in conjunction with the police as well how we move forward. And currently it's planned that a report will be presented to Council in December this year to outline the next steps. The order is a council decision, so we do need to have any ratification of any order by the council. So that's all I've got to say. If you've got any questions, I've got Colin Smith, the operational manager, with me this evening. So I know Colin has been very close to public space protection orders for a number of years. So between us, if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Matthew, do you have any Town and Community Council questions?
There's no questions in the chat. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let me know if there are, please. And Vale councillors, any questions? No. Councillor Perks?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask around the new orders that are coming into place, and if either of the officers could just give us a little bit of background of the issues that they have faced in those particular spots during this the summer, and that's led to them being sort of incorporated in this, please.
Colin, do you want to take that or shall I, as you haven't had a chance to speak?
Yeah, sure, I'll pick up that one. Thanks, Emma. So, yeah, I'm really referring on. Good evening.
Sorry. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. So, in response to Councillor Perks' query, really it's going back to the police report we heard earlier. We had the problems at Ogmore over the beach over the summer, likewise at Cosmeston Country Park and Penarth Esplanade. Sometimes occasionally we get on the cliff top and also on the beach itself, and the pier's been ongoing for a couple of years, to be honest. It's just we missed the boat last time for the previous PSPOs, and we're waiting for the next time for them to be renewed for the opportunity to include those. Roost Point, likewise, we introduced bylaws a couple of years ago, and it's been very difficult managing those with the fishing on the lagoon and camping and antisocial behaviour that's been experienced for some time now. So collectively, those are the areas identified where we've had the most problems, but strangely enough, we've never had any PSPOs on them. And it was for those reasons that those were included. It's worth noting that because we've had a couple of queries on Penarth front about the consumption of alcohol, and it's not to address alcohol where it's consumed under licensing arrangements, so for restaurants and cafes and bars, etc. This is purely to do with antisocial behaviour, and that's where the offence comes in on PSPOs. It's not an offence to drink at all. It's an offence to have antisocial behaviour as of consumption of alcohol. And that's really probably, you know, really deals with most of the questions we get. Is that okay, Councillor Perks?
Yes, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Wilson, did you want to ask a question?
Can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Obviously, we had lots of concerns earlier on in the summer with Penarth Esplanade, but I think it's now much more clearer as to what people can do. We had a lot of issues with people drinking away from those licensed premises, and it seems to be a lot more settled. In fact, I was down there a couple of days ago, and it is much better than it was. But my question is, obviously, going forward on this, in terms of the consumption of alcohol, bearing in mind we have got some major events coming up, notably November the 5th, and fireworks, and I just wonder what sort of orders are in place for that, because I do think that's going to be an important issue going forward.
Yeah, so firstly on the Penarth one, I would have to agree with you. It has settled down, particularly with the new cafes and the new restaurants that have opened. It certainly seems to have settled down. But the PSPO will give us an opportunity to deal with the matters away from those areas, like I mentioned on the pier, and sometimes we get occasions where people go down onto the beach in the slipway. So really it's to tackle the antisocial behaviour, not really deal with people who are honestly and responsibly going to cafes and restaurants and just enjoying themselves, to be honest, or for an event. In terms of what you're saying about the, sorry, Councillor Wilson, your second part of your question?
Yeah, the second point was really about the fireworks coming up on November the 5th and making sure we got sufficient control. It's obviously talking to the police.
Yeah.
To make sure there isn't too much consumption of alcohol. So I know it does go on.
No.
And clearly, okay, there may be some public displays being banned because of COVID.
We would take
there still may be informal displays on our open areas in particular.
Yeah, we would take the same stance as we've done all year, to be honest. On
Hello?
a technicality. Can
Hello
you hear
there.
me, Councillor Wilson? We can hear you.
Oh,
can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. I hear you.
We would take exactly the same stance we've done all summer, Councillor Wilson. So most of the time, the police manage the situation like a PSPO, but a lot of the time people weren't arrested or fixed penalty notice issued. All we did was deal with the antisocial behaviour, which you can do by an arrest anyway, or you would confiscate the alcohol. We would do those measures anyway, even though the PSPO may not be technically in effect. So in terms of the bonfire night, the Halloweens, etc., we would carry on with the same stance as we've done all summer.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Does that answer your question, Councillor Wilson? Yeah. Okay. Any more questions, please, from anybody? No? All is quiet. Matthew, no questions your end?
No, nothing further, thank you.
Okay. In that case, can this committee pass the recommendation that we consider the contents of the prevention of alcohol-related antisocial behaviour, resorts, town centres and public open spaces report? I think we're all happy to recommend that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think thank you, Emma, for that, and thank you, Colin, for your help as well. I think that brings us to the end of our remote virtual meeting. Could I just say that, can I just remind all town and community council representatives that request for consideration forms are available via Democratic Services should any of you wish to raise a matter for this committee to consider next time we meet. And the meeting of this committee is next scheduled for Tuesday, the 26th of January 2021. And I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. Can I just check with Amy that she's happy with everything? Hello, Amy.
Thank you. Hello, thank you, Chairman. Yes, no, that's everything. Thank you very much. There was no objection on the recommendations, so they have stood. And we've considered all questions from our town and community councillors. Thank you very much.
Thank
well
you. So
it went very well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
All right.
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, good night. Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you all.
Bob.
Good night.